Okay. We're recording.
Cool.
All
right, welcome back to Valley Bible Studies Podcast, going into episode 2. Mark.
That is the second one.
That is, like, not chronologically, though.
Not chronologically. Probably written first, but...
Probably.
In the order
second. In which they've been laid out in the great book.
Yes.
Yes, it is.
The great book. Yep.
That's what...
It is, yeah. I'm
one.
not disagreeing with you.
Okay. So Matthew might sound a little wonky. Just want to, like, you've already listened to it more than likely. And you'll notice that...
Oh, you're saying the episode, not the book.
No, yeah. Wow.
Like, Matthew is weird, you guys. You can skip that episode if you want to.
The episode that we recorded about Matthew might sound a little wonky. Luke and I are not...
We're learning.
Yeah.
We're novices.
We're not tech savvy.
Not at all.
At all. And
people expect me as the youngest member of staff at church to know tech things, and then I don't.
Right, but while you're the youngest, mentally,
I'm one of the oldest.
Yeah.
No disputing that, but they still expect me to know tech stuff, and then I don't.
Just do your job.
That's what I'm doing.
So we're figuring out, how to do the technology side of all of this. So this episode should sound much better.
Hopefully.
But with that being said, we want to go ahead and dive into Mark. What a read.
It's a good one.
It gives us the perspective of Jesus as not only is he human, obviously, but he holds that divine wisdom.
Right.
And people question it, obviously.
Yeah.
Because they've never encountered it before.
Right.
And
also just the pacing of Mark, like... It's the action movie of the four. Like, things just keep happening.
And so, like, you know how when you read a book, you create that movie in your mind?
Mm-hmm.
It's a weird movie.
Because, like, there's not really... It doesn't transition much.
No.
It's just...
It's
and
one
then
thing
this
after
happened,
another.
and then this happened.
Right. And as it's going through, you kind of, when you're playing this movie in your mind, the way that it's worded, it makes for a weird movie.
Yeah.
And your portrayal of people is, I don't know how to put it, but it's odd because people are so, like, they've become little, like, fangirls.
A little bit, yeah.
When they hear and see Jesus, it's like...
It's obvious that he's the center of attention.
It's Jesus! Like,
right.
That's how I picture, because when it talks about the masses.
Right.
And they're all coming through. And
right.
Jesus is, at the time, the most famous person around.
Nobody doesn't have an opinion. Everybody falls somewhere when it comes to Jesus.
You're either on the bandwagon or you're a hater.
Yes.
And, the way that's used today, obviously, is not in the same cases, because nobody's doing what Jesus did.
Right.
But that's kind of how it was. People were either all about it or...
Really not all of it.
They're like, who's this schmuck? How is he saying,
He's blaspheming. Like one of the things that I keep in mind just in the Gospels in general that Mark is really good at talking about or like portraying just based on how he talks about things is either Jesus is the Son of God or he is deserving of the death penalty. Because if he's making these claims and can't back them up...
Then yeah.
He's blaspheming and he needs to be put to death.
And that's what a lot of people were really bought into because, but it's also their reasoning wasn't, obviously it wasn't accurate because they wanted to stick to tradition.
But nothing like this has ever happened before. You can't do tradition with this.
No, and so and like you said, it's one or the other because he's coming in and saying, this is no longer the law.
Right.
I am instituting the law.
I'm fulfilling the law.
I am the law. Right. And so with that perspective, you're either going to buy into it or he's going to be the person that is just so blasphemous that what needs to be done.
Right.
That it gets to the extreme point where they want to kill him.
And it's not like a few of them want to kill him.
Right.
Like, it's the majority of people at the end are like, okay, he's taking it too far.
Yeah. And because it's gotten to the point to where people were saying, oh, he's king?
You can't put the genie back in the box.
Right.
At that point,
and
it crossed a line.
And it was so far that people, they couldn't handle it anymore. Yeah. And it was so overwhelming, especially in the authority, to where like something has to be done.
But here's what's wild about it, right? The way that he gets there is by helping people and by serving people. Like, you would think, based on their reaction, if you just had their reaction and you didn't have his ministry before to figure out what they're reacting to, you would think that he's saying, like, treasonous stuff.
Right.
But he's not. He's just saying, hey, people are, like, inherently valuable because they're people, and maybe we should do things to help them.
Well, and we see a couple examples in Mark where Jesus tells them, hey, don't go tell people that I'm here.
Mm-hmm.
Don't tell them.
It's not about me.
It's not about me. We've done what we've needed to do with you. I want you to live a good life and just stay put, my man.
And tell people that God helped you.
And tell people that, yes, that God helped you. But what do?
They start telling people about Jesus.
Like, this guy healed me. He's over there. You know?
Which you can almost imagine just the facepalm that he immediately does.
Right.
Like, this is the opposite of what we just said.
He sees so many people just coming up to him like, did you healed that guy? He told me you healed him. And then Jesus just does the facepalm like, oh, dude. You had one job.
I gave you one
job to not say that I'm here. Don't tell people that I'm here, my man.
And then 5,000 people show up needing lunch.
And before you know it, I've got 2 fish. And I need to feed all these people because you couldn't keep your mouth shut. Appreciate you, man. Mark gives us so many examples of the simple-mindedness of people.
Mm-hmm.
And it blows my mind how even especially today, people can claim to be so smart.
Mm-hmm.
People can claim to have it all figured out. But then when the Bible, when Jesus here puts it so
simply
and specifically,
mm-hmm.
That makes it.
One of my professors, the professor that I had for Life of Christ, which is a class you can take at Freed Hardeman, go Lions.
Go Lions.
He grew up in like rural East Tennessee during like when the coal mines were still super big. Like when you think coal mining, you think West Virginia, but this was when there was still a lot of coal mining going on in like.
So he's that old.
Yeah. He's up there, but one of my favorite professors I've ever had, and one of his statements that he sort of opened our Life of Christ class with is the Bible is for coal miners, because he has those memories of those guys who didn't graduate high school because they had to go to the mines. Didn't even have a shot at like anything resembling a college education because they had to go to the mines, and if they weren't pulling their weight, their family doesn't eat. Like, he remembers those guys, and he remembers going to church with those guys because that was the one day off. Like, Sunday was their day off because they all needed to go to church together. And his statement, the Bible is for coal miners, is basically that point.
Yeah.
Like, once you've gotten to that point, you either take it or you leave it.
It all depends on what their motive is. Do they actually want to find out the truth?
Right.
Or do they actually want to justify what they're doing with their lives?
And we're using third person pronouns,
we are.
But we do this all the time.
No, absolutely.
Like, I've changed my mind about so many things about the Bible just in the past like couple years, just because, not like big like the theme of the entire thing level
right.
stuff. Like it's all about Jesus. I'm not disputing that. But just like ideas that I have that sort of, I had those ideas because I brought them to the table before I even looked at what the Bible had said.
Right.
It's way, way easy to let what I already think and know and believe and all of that stuff drive my response to Jesus. And one of the messages of Mark is that's not how it works. At the end of the day, you're either going to be like, he's either going to be your champion or he's going to be the guy that you really, really don't like. And if you come into it with ideas and beliefs that you already hold that you're trying to have justified,
those preconceived notions,
he's going to be the guy that you really don't like.
Yep.
All right, let's start text.
Let's
jump in.
So one thing that I noticed in Let me find it. It's when Jesus brings those people with him, and he, So chapter 3,
okay,
verse 13.
Okay.
This is something that I never noticed reading through.
Okay.
So and he went up.
So this is like the apostles are being
called. And he went up on the mountain, and he called him those he himself wanted. So he calls the people that Jesus wanted to bring with him.
Right.
And they came to him. Then he appointed 12 that they might be with him, and then that he might send them out to preach. Right. I never noticed this. He brought, correct me if I'm wrong, he brought more than 12 people.
Yeah, that's what it looks like.
Right.
He brought a bunch, and then he appointed 12.
Man, imagine being one of the people that you didn't like. That's like
tough.
The worst version of dodgeball ever.
Yeah.
Like in gym class, and you're picking you're picking teams. I know this is probably a terrible analogy, but you're picking teams for dodgeball, and you're like
you're last.
You're last.
Pretty much.
Like, okay, let's put this into perspective though. If you're one of those people, and you like say, you don't get picked, you still were called up by Jesus.
Right. You're still on the mountaintop.
Like you were at least in consideration.
Right. And that's Ephesians chapter 4, right? Some were called to be apostles, and others were called to be teachers, and others were called to be elders, and others everybody has a spot.
Right.
But it is interesting that he picks the apostles out of a bigger group that he brings together to pick them.
But okay, so again, imagine you're one of the people that's not one of the 12. He gives the 12 something. What do you know what it is?
Power to cast out demons. Yeah,
dude, that'd be so cool. Are you kidding me?
It would be nice. Yeah,
it's like, oh man, my boy Peter. He did what last weekend? He cast out a demon. Man, I wish.
Especially if you're somebody who knew these guys before this,
right?
Like if you grew up down the street from like James and John's house, and they're like, the Sons of Thunder, and like in the inner circle and stuff.
That is another thing I want to point out. So, I want to make sure I'm saying this word right.
Boanerges? It's close.
Right. I think it's geese.
Geese, gaze.
Yeah, so
something like that.
That's a funny word, right?
It is a funny word.
Meaning what though?
Sons of Thunder.
I'm forget that other B word. I'm going by Sons of Thunder.
Yeah.
That's the coolest.
That's nice.
That is the coolest name ever. Imagine you and your brother, and they're like, "Oh yeah, they're the Sons of Thunder." That's
mic drop.
Yeah, that's cool.
And who gave them that name? Jesus.
Yeah, you're not getting any cooler than that.
Yep.
So,
but see, they let that get to their head because these are the guys that later ask for the left and right hand.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, that's cool. Yeah, they have a special spot, but
not that special of a spot.
Not that special. Yeah.
Not that special of a spot. That's those spots are kind of reserved.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not for you, James and John. But shout out James and John, Sons of Thunder. That was something that I thought was really, just cool. I just think me and my little brother, the Sons of Thunder. Like, oh, that's awesome.
Poor Brian.
He lives in a different state now. Well, technically, so does Josh now. Josh is now a student at Frieda Hardeman.
Go Lions.
Go Lions. And yeah, so.
Fair enough.
I don't know. It's different.
Anyway.
So then Jesus goes and starts speaking in parables.
Mm-hmm.
Why does Jesus speak in parables?
Well, what he says is...
He tells us why.
What he says to the apostles is so that seeing they will not see, hearing they will not hear, which is a weird thing to say. Like, if I'm coming to Israel trying to prove to everybody that I am the fulfillment of the law that they've had for like 1,200 years, it's counterintuitive from a human perspective to start saying, now I'm going to talk in riddles and in parables to try and convince people. Like, in my mind, if you're trying to get people to respect you as the Messiah, you don't go the route of seeing riddles. They won't see, hearing they won't hear. But what he says is, there's a time for this.
Yeah.
Like, everything that he's doing is going to be fulfilled eventually, but it can't happen yet. Because if he just says...
If he were to just say it flat out and simple...
Then the cross doesn't happen.
Right.
Because
everyone's going to make sure...
Because everybody's going to know.
Right. And so then it might become like an all-out war.
Yeah. Like, at that point, he has people, like,
if he
rebelling
says,
against Rome.
Those guys are going to kill me.
Yeah.
And because if my Savior says to me that I'm going to get killed, this is the guy that's going to betray me.
No, you're not.
And
Absolutely
and these are the
not.
people that are going to kill me. Then I'm going to do everything in my power if I'm fully invested in him to make sure that doesn't happen.
Right.
And so that's why not only is it because he can't be just literal with them, but it's also the learning experience of what a parable does.
Oh yeah, that's a great teaching tool.
Yes, and using these parables, using these metaphors, like I do it as a teacher. One of my students actually asked me, because she claims to be a Christian, and she says, Mr. Luckett, if I am a Christian but don't go to church, am I really a Christian?
Well,
and I said, okay, well, let's look at it this way. If you claim to be a bodybuilder but never go to the gym,
yep, are
you really a bodybuilder? And the look that she gave me, 'cause I didn't mean to get that deep with her, but she's the one that asked the question, so it's kind of her fault. And the look that she gave me, dude.
Yep.
And so, because if you're just flat out literal and just say, no, it doesn't give them the opportunity to
learn,
digest it.
Right.
And if Jesus just says,
there are some people who are going to get into heaven and there are some who aren't. And here's the things that are going to stand in your way. Versus there's seed that falls on the ground and there's seed that falls in the thorns and there's seed that falls on the good ground. That's a big difference.
Because in those two different scenarios, in which scenario does learning actually occur?
Well, he's meeting them where they're at.
Right.
Like agriculture especially. Not everybody's going to know about city life that he's talking to, especially since he starts in Galilee, like he starts where he's from. Not everybody's going to know what the big city life in Jerusalem is like. But farming is how we get food. Farming is how we stay alive through the winter. And so if he starts there,
that clicks with them.
Right.
And when they hear that, they're like, oh, it's the light bulb moment.
Right. Yeah.
And so if you go back to chapter 2 and you're looking at starting in verse 16, right? And there were scribes and Pharisees, and they saw him eating with the tax collectors and sinners. They said to the disciples, how is it that he eats and drinks with tax collectors and sinners? And they could have just said, because they're the ones that need it.
Yeah.
Or something to the effect of, Jesus knows.
Well, part of the equation is legitimately because you won't let me eat with you because you don't like what I'm saying. But he can't really come out and say that either.
He can't come out and say that. And so what does Jesus say then? So Jesus heard them, right?
These are the guys who will let me eat with them because they're the ones who need me to.
But this is exactly what he says. And this is where that connection is of making them think and finding that moment when they do think about it. Jesus said, he heard them and he said to them, those who are well are in no need of a physician, but those who are sick. I did not come to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance.
Yep.
We have a member here at Westside, Daniel Bradford.
Oh, yeah.
Who, one of the things he brings up, because it's so true, is that church isn't for people that, well, church is for everyone. Let's mark that right now. But the church is a hospital.
Not a museum, but a hospital.
It's not a museum. It's not a show. It's not XYZ. It's a hospital. It's for people that are sick.
Which we all are.
Every single person. And so.
But the people who know that are usually a lot more receptive than the people who think that they're fine. Which is the point that Jesus is making.
Exactly. And as you go through Mark, that becomes more and more evident. Because the people that are sick, the people that do need help, are the ones that are they're the mob. They're not the mob, but they're the
they're the outsiders.
They're the they're the fanboys and the fangirls.
Oh yeah, they're also the ones that become the.
They're the ones chasing Jesus, saying, ones. "I need you."
Yes,
because they realize that they're sick and they're hearing, "Oh, this person is saving lives."
And the ones that end up killing him are the ones that think they can do it on their own.
How ironic.
Weird. It's almost like that still happens.
Took the words right out of my mouth.
Thanks, man. We do try.
Luke and I do find ourselves in multiple scenarios where we'll
say the same thing at the same time.
At the same time.
Or think the same thing, and we'll just look at each other and
Or one of us will think it, the other person will say it, and it's
weird.
It's weird.
It's strange,
but it's fun.
It's fun. It's especially fun when we catch other people off guard with it.
Yeah, because if you and I say the exact same thing, and then other people look at us, like sometimes we don't even give a reaction. We're just like, "Yep,
yeah,
that happened."
Pretty much. All right, I'm going to take us to chapter 7 because this is going to be my big contribution to today.
You love chapter 7.
I do love chapter.
And I do. I would like to preface this with, he said, "Hey, I've kind of realized something," and I'm like, "Oh, what is it? This is happening."
I'm keeping you in suspense,
and he wouldn't tell me what it was.
I'm keeping you in. I want we have to make a good podcast episode. I want your
so rude.
I want your reaction to be genuine.
Okay,
so I'm keeping you in suspense.
So first, give us the outline of chapter 7. What's going on, and then tell us what's new.
I'm not going to start at the beginning. I'm going to start with the thing that I just figured out. So, most of the way through chapter 7, starting in chapter 24, there's this story.
Chapter 24.
Verse 24. Yeah. Chapter 7, verse 24. There's not a chapter 24 in Mark.
No, there's not.
Mark 7:24 through like 30-ish. There is a woman, right? She's Canaanite. She's specifically Syro-Phoenician, which is like northwestern Canaan. For all you Old Testament scholars out there, this is where Jezebel came from. This is like back in the days of Ahab and Elijah and all those people in 1 Kings. This is big bad territory. This is like where Baal worship and all that stuff came from. So she's got that background. She's from the same area as all that stuff. But she comes to Jesus and she says, "My daughter is sick to the point of death." And she had an unclean spirit that was like had gotten her sick to the point of death. She comes to Jesus, and Jesus at first sort of blows her off. Like he says, "I've come for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. I'm not here for you." There's an element of truth to that because he hasn't fulfilled the law yet because the cross hasn't happened. So he's saying, he's blowing her off and saying, "I'm not here for you. I'm not here for you." And she keeps persisting. And eventually he uses this metaphor. He says, "Let the little children be fed first, because it isn't right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs." And she replied to him, verse 28, "Lord, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." Then he told her, "Because of this reply you may go. The demon has left your daughter." Okay, so she's basically, like by the power of her persistence, gets an audience with him and then gets her request met. In my brain, for a long time, I was like, this is weird behavior from Jesus.
Just because of the crumbs?
Well, no, like this is weird behavior from Jesus because you think of Jesus as like the guy who people came to be helped and he helped them. Like you don't think of Jesus as the kind of guy to say,
"Shoo."
Right. Yeah, like get on my face. I'm not here for you right now.
Right.
Like that's not the compassionate Jesus that you think of. Okay, this is the pieces coming together for me for the first time.
Okay.
Before this, the rest of the chapter up to this, Jesus is talking to the Pharisees about purity. Right? Beginning of the chapter, the Pharisees ask a question about, "Why do you and your disciples not wash your hands before you eat?" And Mark even says, like parenthetically as a narrator, because the Jews wash their hands in a specific way, and there's a bunch of other ritual stuff that they do because it's part of their custom.
Sure.
And Jesus takes that and uses it as an opportunity to talk about what purity actually looks like spiritual purity, what that actually looks like. Because the Jews have this view of purity as you've checked all the boxes, you've done all the customary stuff, now you're pure, now you can be part of the assembly. And Jesus says, no, it's actually a spiritual reality, and it's not what happens around you. It's not like what comes into your mouth that defiles you.
Right, because they had it was more of a literal.
Right. They had over-literalized, that's not a word, but they'd over-literalized the Old Testament. And he says, it's not what comes into you that makes you defiled. It's what goes out of you.
Right.
Because whatever you say, that's the contents of your heart. Your words and your actions display who you actually are.
Right, and he says that in verse 23, all these evil things come from within and
defile a person. Yes. Mm-hmm. So defilement is from within. It's not because of your circumstances, it's because of who you are.
Boom.
It's not because of the Syrophoenician woman's circumstances that he heals her daughter. It's not because of the fact that she's from that area. It's not because of the specific problem. It's not because she has something wrong about her mentality towards Jesus. And it's not even because Jesus tests her by blowing her off first, by saying, "Shoo, get out of my face." He's giving her that test to see whether or not what he just said about defilement and where it comes from is working. It's not about all the stuff that happens to her. It's not even about the test that Jesus gives her. It's about who she is and the request that she makes and the faith that says, regardless of what he says, regardless of all this outside stuff, I'm still going to believe in him because he's the Messiah. That's purity. So she's basically an object lesson about what he just said.
I see what you mean.
It's not like everything he just said about who you are and what you do based on who you are being the case for purity or impurity. This is a story that proves that.
Well, and you got to think, stereotypes then, stereotypes now are stereotypes.
Are very real.
They're stereotypes for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Because there's a certain level of factual proof that you can attach to it.
Right.
And that's kind of evident in here as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you look away, when you act away, when you possess only so many items, you come from this area, you're expected to be a type of person.
Mm-hmm. This is not somebody that you would expect to be falling at the feet of Jesus.
Right.
For
exactly.
like a bunch of different reasons.
But
what he just said is, it's not about all that outside stuff.
Right.
It's about who you are and what you do. That's what makes you pure before God.
And when she proves I'm from this background by saying that the dogs are eating, the children's crumbs. I can't say they're eating the children. They're not. No. But when she proves that circumstance, and she proves, even though I'm from that, I'm here.
Right. I may not be at the table,
but I'm here.
But I am desperate for what you're offering.
And it was also the selflessness of a mother.
Mm-hmm.
Which, looking at having that perspective, you can, almost any parent would do literally anything for the well-being of their children. Having a new kid now, like, that is fact. Any parent that wouldn't, oh man, shame.
Mm-hmm.
That's, I don't understand that, nor do I ever want to.
Right. And this moment for her is like that parental protection and care for your child meets her personal faith. Like, she knows she needs to do something, and she also knows she has that faith, true faith that requires action.
Yeah, and
that Jesus is who he says he is.
And no matter where you come from,
matters.
You can always care for your children.
Yes.
It does not matter if you have the most money in the world. It doesn't matter if you live in dirt. You can care for your children.
Mm-hmm.
You can provide for your children.
And the best long-term way to do that is by teaching them what faith looks like.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's it. I mean, I had never thought of that perspective.
It's a good story.
It's great. I had never thought about that perspective. So that's good. Thank you, Luke.
Thanks.
What a guy.
I had to have one in there.
You did great. My screen's gone blank.
Uh-oh. That's no good.
That's no bueno.
Well, we've still got the entire second half of Mark.
I know, and we're
30 minutes in.
We're running short of time.
Yeah. There was one more towards the end that you wanted to talk about.
There was.
Chapter 13 is what you said? 12 or 13?
Let me look.
All right, calm down. Is it chapter 10? People were bringing children, and he said, "Let the children come to me."
Yes and no.
What are you talking about then?
Because that, and we already alluded to it about purity.
Yeah.
What is purity? It's what's within. You're not going to find anything more pure than a child.
Right.
There are so many instances in the Bible, and in life today where we see pure innocence.
Mm-hmm.
Again, as a teacher, I could spend an entire episode on just stories from what students have asked me. So we were talking about, if anybody knows the story of Justinian and Empress Theodora from the Byzantine Empire, with the rebuilding of Constantinople, yada 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 yada. Theodora came from rags. She is one of those rags to riches story, literally. At a young age, her father passed away, so she had to go to work. Pretty young, and she became an actress. And an actress at the time wasn't like what we would see as an.
It's not a prestigious thing.
And so here's the thing: like when we look at actresses and actors today, some things come to mind: fame, fortune,
money, yep,
and influence,
yep.
Okay, actors and actresses at that time, did not have those things.
Nope.
And
fame maybe, but definitely not the other two.
Well, maybe. Okay, maybe. But for the common actor and actress, absolutely not.
Right.
And
writers got a lot more of that than like the people writing the plays that the actors were in.
Well, especially later on with the Renaissance, absolutely. Right. But the profession of an actress could be equated to that of a prostitute because it was scandalous. Mm-hmm. People didn't find that profession
You're
to be...
sort of like on the outsides of society.
Right. They didn't find it to be modest. They didn't find it to be... appropriate in a lot of settings. And so when I said that to the class, now they're high schoolers, these are freshmen and sophomores. And so when I said that the profession could be equated to that of a prostitute or of prostitution, most of them were like, oh, okay. And that kind of connected it for them.
Mm-hmm.
There was one student, however, that said, what's prostitution? Right. In a public school setting, you can't, I don't think that's...
As a youth minister, I'm dreading it. It's gonna happen, and I'm dreading it.
Well, and so I didn't answer. I said, okay, how about
ask your parents?
And so every student has a laptop. She turned to her laptop. I said, no. Nope. Do not type that in. Do not type that in. Don't. Luckily, another student leaned in and told her, and she went, ew, as most freshmen in high school would.
Appropriate reaction.
Right. But that right there, in my mind, the first thing I thought of was how innocent.
Yeah.
Imagine going your whole life never
Kids
knowing what
great.
that is. Imagine going your whole life never knowing what the profession of prostitution is.
Kids are great.
You would, think about it. You would never have to worry about that. Because that is something, if you went your entire life without knowing what that profession was, without knowing what, pornography was, without knowing what,
that kind of thing, like, it helps, it makes your estimation of people better. Like, if you're not aware of that kind of stuff, you are much more believing in people. You see the best in people.
Right.
That's part of innocence.
It is. And that is why we are to strive to be as pure and as innocent as a child.
Right.
Because when you find those bad things and you look at people and you associate those people with those bad things, you're being so many different things. You're being judgmental. You're being presumptuous. None of which a child would be.
And none of which Jesus would be.
None of which
because Jesus continues to see the best in people.
Jesus sat with the sinners. He ate with the sinners.
Because they were the people that needed him.
They were the people that needed him.
And knew it.
And if we are to be presumptuous and judgmental and to look at them, and because immediately when we know that they're like that, when we know that they're affiliated with those things that Christians shouldn't be, 9 times out of 10, what are most people going to do? We're going to shut that off.
Right.
We're like,
there's going to be the immediate judgment from the people who aren't.
And more likely than not, what you're going to do is say, I don't want to talk to them.
Mm-hmm.
I'd rather not. Like, they work in that industry.
One of the saddest things that you can do as a Christian, and one of the things that, to me, and I'm not thinking of any particular instance when I say this, but like, if I were to see this happen at a church that I was visiting or something like that, I would think, this church is struggling whether they know it or not. If somebody comes in off the street and no one talks to them, and no one gives them the welcome that everybody else is getting, because...
Has that ever happened to you?
It's not happened to me personally.
It's happened to me.
Has it?
I've visited a church, or congregation. I don't want to say. I visited a Church of Christ. I visited a congregation. I went in. I sat towards the back. I wasn't in the very back, but I sat towards the back. Mm-hmm. Got up, got out.
No one talked to you.
No one said a word.
See, whether they know it or not, that congregation's in trouble. Now, of course,
and it was a big congregation, and so that's kind of one of the dangers.
That's part of it.
That's one of the dangers of having a big congregation.
It's hard to reach everybody.
It is, but if you're going to have a congregation like that, leadership is vital.
It is,
because if the appropriate leadership is not there,
somebody has to be the first one to do that.
Yes,
somebody has to be the one who's looking for the visitor and the person off the street.
It needs to be a priority,
right?
Because if you just say, all right, everyone, we want to make sure that we welcome our visitors. That's kind of like if you're having a medical emergency and you say, somebody call 911. Mm-hmm. No one's going to call 911.
Right.
Because no one's going to assume the responsibility.
Right.
So if you say, everyone, make sure that we greet our visitors.
No one's going to do it.
The thought that's going to come into people's head is that,
somebody got it.
Someone else is going to do it. But if you say, we're going to designate this person, or this family, and maybe rotate it. I don't know. Mm-hmm. I'm not in charge of that kind of stuff. But maybe that's an idea to ensure that it is a priority and that it is being carried out.
Right. Now, of course, the general message of watch out, like not watch out like they're dangerous or anything.
But watch yourself.
But like be on the lookout for people who are new, people who are there for the first time, people who may seem out of place. Now, that's careful because you don't want to assume.
Right.
Like, you don't want to make any assumptions about somebody's lifestyle just because they've come in for the first time. But if you've never seen them, somebody you need to talk to.
And you also want to be very personable. You don't want to give, because...
Don't make it seem like it's a task.
Right. And there's also like you said, you don't want to assume anything, and you don't want to go up to someone and appear to be presumptuous.
Right. Don't do the holier than thou
that's
thing.
Okay. See, we did it. We just did it. I thought you said it. And I didn't know how to incorporate it into what I was trying to say.
Yeah.
But you don't want to give that holier than thou, because what that's going to do is
drive them away.
Yeah, they're never going to want to come back. I will give an example. It's a good example. Don't worry. And it's actually about you.
Oh no! What I do now?
You were teaching. No.
There's the problem.
You were preaching.
There's the bigger problem.
It was this past Sunday, and we had two visitors. They were relatively young.
Yeah, I met them just briefly, but I met them.
Man. And while you were preaching, they were sitting by themselves, and I was like, okay, I need to talk to them after worship. They're about our age. I wanted to make a point, but I kept kind of turning to see how engaged they were. And I don't remember exactly what it is you were saying. But
something stupid.
You used the phrase, "Hold up, wait a minute,
something ain't
right," and they laughed.
Mm-hmm.
And my first thought was, "Dude, way to connect." Granted, the older people in the audience have no clue
what that's from. Yeah,
that it's from anything. They probably just thought, "Oh, Luke's a little
Luke's
silly.
a goober.
Well,
what a guy,
silly goose."
Which is fair. All of that's true.
All of that is true. You are a silly goose.
That's true.
But to them, it wasn't anything. To them, it was you being goofy. To them, it was, oh, this guy's cool. This guy, all right, we can talk to him. And I can almost, did you talk to them before or after the service?
After.
I guarantee they were more receptive to anything that you said because you had that connection with them.
They were nice folks.
Now, there are preachers that are very formal, and that's fine. Having you want to have a certain...
you want to have a degree of respect.
Yes.
For what you're talking about and what you're doing.
Exactly, because, I mean, what you're preaching the Word of God.
Well, and I've talked to we had guys and girls split classes in the youth group a couple months ago. And one of the things I talked to the guys about was when you get up to do something. Because our guys in the youth group are very good at, like, when they're asked to do something in the worship, they don't complain. They're good at doing it. But one of the things I emphasized to them was, don't go in without a lack of preparation. Like, don't go in and just do it on the fly because you've been asked to, because what you're doing is that is you approaching Jesus and approaching his bride. The church is talked about as Jesus' bride. So when you're up in the pulpit doing something or on the stage or whatever you have, you are talking to Jesus and his wife. You've basically like been invited to participate in a family event with Jesus and his wife. That should be something you take seriously. And that should be something that like is not flippant and is not just like, okay, we're going to do this and get out in an hour. That kind of thing.
You calling me out?
No, I'm not calling you. Hey, if the Spirit convicts you, my man.
I really thought you were going to say if the boot fits.
Well, that too. I just said the preacher version.
I'm known for I'm known for being a very wing it kind of person. I will say, if I'm speaking, if I'm doing the Lord's Supper, or if I'm saying a prayer, all of that is premeditated.
Yeah.
This podcast has been premeditated.
Mm-hmm. Quite a bit.
There are some things though, and I think it's more of, I don't know. I think my version of winging it is definitely different than other people's version of.
It's very different than mine.
Yeah, because my winging it still has an outline. I have an outline of how I'm going to wing it.
Now, see, if I wing it, I literally just like do it.
No, see, I come up with an outline and then I let my I let my thoughts and my words do the rest. Mm-hmm. But I'm within a certain limitation.
Yeah, you've got a skeleton there.
Yeah. The last thing I want us to talk about.
Okay,
because we are running out of time.
Because we're 42 minutes in.
All right. If your eye offends you, what do?
Pluck it out.
Plug it out. I'm not a one. Look, I don't want to be the one-eyed bandit. I don't want pirate jokes for the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard for me to control what I look at. If my right hand is doing something that offends my left, did I say it backwards?
It's if your right hand.
It just says if your hand.
Oh.
What do?
You cut it off.
Lop it off. It's gone. I don't want to be.
You really don't want to be pirate.
I don't want to be a
eye patch and hook hand.
I don't want to be Captain Hook with an eye patch. I don't. That's often, I don't really think too many people take those verses literally. But how often do we apply it?
Right.
Because let me tell you right now, you can't see what I'm doing, obviously. I'm holding up my phone.
That is your phone.
This is my phone. I would like to think that, I wouldn't like to, I would assume that the majority of sins that occur in our lives happen on this phone.
Yeah. In the 21st century, that's probably true.
This is how I apply it.
Mm-hmm.
There are various ways to apply this, as long as it's not misinterpreted. Okay? The way I'm seeing these verses is that you can control what's in your life. You can control what you give into. Because we're reminded in 1 Corinthians that the Lord isn't going to let us be tempted beyond what we can handle.
Mm-hmm. 10:13.
1 Corinthians 10:13. He's not going to let us fall into temptation if we can't handle it.
10:13? I'm going to check it now that I've said it.
I'm pretty sure.
I'm like 98% sure that's right, but we're not doing false doctrine on the podcast, we promise.
Bet your bottom dollar we're not. But with that, knowing that God isn't going to allow us to be tempted beyond our measure.
10:13. Yep.
Booyah. I can get a dumb phone, and I can be just as productive in my life as I can with a smartphone, and
probably more productive. Because honestly, what do you need a phone for?
Do you know what's really upsetting?
To call and text.
You know what's really upsetting?
Much.
I'm a 28-year-old with a TikTok account. I've never made a video. I don't plan on ever making a video. But I spend more time
not on your account, but VBS has a TikTok coming in January.
Different purposes.
Ta-da!
Different purposes.
I know it's branding, man.
But I spend more time on that than I definitely should. If I have a dumb phone, that opportunity is not there.
Right.
If anything, that opens more opportunities for me to open my Bible and study God's Word.
Right. Because, honestly, 98% of what we do on our phones is unnecessary. If you think about, calling and texting being the necessary, functions of a phone,
mm-hmm.
easily 90% of what I do on my phone is not either of those two things.
And we talk about what are you willing to sacrifice?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the thing for me.
Mm-hmm.
If Jesus showed up today and said, I need you to lose the phone entirely, would you do it?
Yeah. I think, okay, first off, if we lived in biblical times and he said that to us.
That'd be pretty easy.
No, I think if we lived in biblical times, and let's say an iPhone existed during biblical times.
Okay, there you go.
And we were there, I think it would be harder than it would be today.
Explain.
When was the last time Jesus spoke to you in person that wasn't through the word?
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
But my point is that if you have those things that are obstructing your ability to be with God, to be in His Word, and to do what's right, don't. Okay, let me say this right now. You can quote me. Don't cut off your hand.
Yeah, that's a bad move.
Don't do it. Don't do it. Okay.
Don't pluck your eye out either.
And you can if your argument is Jesus told me to, it's not gonna.
No, that's not what he meant.
Not what. Remember, guys, we're talking about parables. We're talking about metaphors.
Yeah,
this is one of them.
This is literature. This is not a literal instruction manual throughout.
Okay.
But on the point of sacrifice, where does Mark end? It ends with the greatest sacrifice that there ever has been.
And we can't mimic that.
Right. Now, should we strive to? Yes. We should strive to have the same sacrificial attitude that Jesus had.
That's where... Stop it.
What?
You keep, jumping to my points.
I need to. We're close to 50.
Okay. I know I take forever to get there, but whatever. It's all about our attitude and how we approach the situation.
Right.
If you approach the situation in temptation, that maybe it's, I'm going to do better later. If you didn't have that, if you didn't approach that temptation to begin with, that mindset wouldn't be there.
Mm-hmm. And the thing about it that makes it both super easy and super hard is if you sit and think to yourself, what are the things that are causing tension between me and Jesus?
Lop it off.
Well, that's my point. If you sit and think, a list will come to you. It's pretty easy to think about, here are the things I'm doing, here are the things I'm thinking, here are the things I have.
The longer you sit and think, the longer that list will get.
And it'll get longer and longer the longer you sit there. But that's the easy part. You can easily identify them. But then if you ask the follow-up question, what do I do about it? Once again, you can easily identify what to do about it, but those are not easy things to do.
And let me tell you, that list is going to be a lot shorter.
Yes.
The list to identify how can I fix these things is going to be significantly shorter
than the list of things themselves.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Because what it boils down to is be better.
Be more Christ-like.
If you know better, do better.
Right.
And the only way that you could know better is by reading His Word.
There's a reason that the fruits of the Spirit list ends with self-control, because none of the other 8 mean anything.
It won't matter, yeah.
If you can't self-control and apply them.
Yeah, if you can't control your actions, the rest the other list is the other what'd you say, 8? Yeah.
8.
They're irrelevant.
Yeah. Pretty much.
Let me tell you this right now. We could go on and on and on.
Once again, all 26 of this year's episodes going through the New Testament could legitimately be 3 hours apiece.
But
we want to respect your time.
And we have
unlike we have today
yeah.
at 50 minutes.
We appreciate your attention and your extra time. Remember to check out the socials. Remember to check out the website, valleyBibleStudies.com. Check out our Facebook, our Instagram, and eventually our TikTok and YouTube channel. And we're really looking forward to those things launching this year.
Well, they've already launched by the time we release this.
That's why I said this year.
Okay, well, we're recording before they launch. They will have launched by the time you're hearing this. So
we appreciate you.
Thanks for hanging in there with us.
God bless.